and welcome to the Know Nothings News. So I heard that we have finally reached the end of Reconstruction era. Can you explain to me what America's Reconstruction is, for Brenda?
Of course, Joy. America's Reconstruction is the U.S.'s process of rebuilding the South and reunifying the nation after the end of the Civil War.
That sounds like a good plan. So for Brenda, would you like to share some of the legal accomplishments of the Reconstruction efforts?
Well, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were passed. The 13th Amendment abolishes slavery and involuntary servitude. The 14th Amendment declares that former slaves be considered citizens, and the 15th Amendment provided suffrage for black males.
Other laws passed during the Reconstruction era included the Reconstruction Act of 1867, which divided the South into 5 military districts that could rejoin the Union if they agreed to guarantee the basic rights to African Americans. Another law was the Civil Rights Act of 1867, which guaranteed equal treatment for African Americans in public accommodations.
How about the accomplishments of the Reconstruction for African Americans socially?
Oh yes, I should mention that. Well, social accomplishments include the establishment of schools for African Americans, also hospitals that served the African American community rewrote constitutions, updated penal codes, and began the rebuilding of the war-torn South was all established.
Thank you, Joy. Stay tuned for Fabrindi's on sharecropping. Good morning, I'm Fabrindi, your news reporter of the latest news about sharecropping. Even though the Civil War had freed all African Americans from slavery with the ratification of the 13th Amendment, many African Americans were still involved in the practice of sharecropping, in which African Americans began to rent land from the white plantation owners and paid for their rental fee with a portion of their yearly crop. Although both benefited from the system in that African Americans did not have to work under the direct supervision of an overseer and in that white plantation owners were able to generate enough cotton to be sold on the market, the sharecropping system caused most African Americans to be in constant debt to the white plantation owners because they paid back the loans for seed money and tools. Sharecroppers were left with very little for basic necessities. As a result, the sharecropping system prevented many African Americans from obtaining much land and money. Thanks for watching, and this is Fabrindi signing off with the news of sharecropping. Stay tuned for news on presidential reconstruction with Fabrindi. Hello again, Know Nothings. I'm Fabrinda, here with the latest news about presidential reconstruction. To begin with, in memory of our dear President Abraham Lincoln, who was assassinated in 1865, we will address his actions during the Reconstruction era. President Lincoln was eager to restore the Union with his 10% plan, which stated that if 10% of the vote count in a southern state takes an oath of allegiance to the United States and promises to abide by emancipation, then that state can establish new government and send representatives to Congress. He also vetoed the Wade-Davis bill, which would have established that at least half of the voters of each southern state would have to sign a loyalty oath of the United States and would have to agree to guarantee equal treatment before the law for former slaves in order to have that southern state join the Union. After President Lincoln's assassination, Andrew Johnson assumed power of the position of presidency. Since Johnson had no affinity for the Republican Party, nor affinity for emancipation for African Americans, he continued with the lenient approach of Lincoln's plan of Reconstruction. He quickly recognized the new southern states as legitimate after they repudiated secession and ratified the 13th Amendment. Due to his lenient approach, many members of the old slave-owning class came back into power and allowed the black codes to replicate the conditions that African Americans faced during the pre-wartime period. Furthermore, Johnson vetoed an extension of the Freedmen's Bureau and the Civil Rights Act that were designed to overturn the black codes, which was intended to limit the socio-economic opportunities and freedoms open to the blacks by forcing blacks to work under conditions that closely resembled slavery. However, Congress overrode both vetoes. In response to Johnson's insufficient support for the Reconstruction programs, the radical Republicans put Johnson on an impeachment trial for violating the Tenure of Office Act. Johnson, however, was cleared of being found guilty. This is Fabrinda signing off. Stay tuned for more on Reconstruction with Joy.
Good evening, Know Nothings. I'm Joy, here again with more on the latest news of Reconstruction. During the Reconstruction era, the Southern government was composed of a variety of elements. Let's start off with Democrats. The Democrats still served in the Southern government, but in minority. The Republicans also served in the Southern legislature and were composed of the so-called scalawags and so-called carpetbaggers and African Americans. The scalawags were Southerners who joined the Republican Party after the Civil War, supported Reconstruction, and were seen as traitors by many Southerners. The carpetbaggers were Northerners who moved to South during Reconstruction era in order to either seek personal advancement in coming South or to assist former slaves to adjust in their new lives as free men and women. Carpetbaggers were often viewed by Southerners as taking advantage of the defeated South. Well, this is Joy, signing off. Stay tuned for Brindy and for Brenda for more on the end of Reconstruction.
Good evening, Know-Nothings. I'm for Brindy.
And I'm for Brenda.
And we're here for the latest news of the end of Reconstruction. There have been a couple of factors that contributed to the end of Reconstruction period. First off, Southern Democrats who called themselves Redeemers aggressively sought to regain power in the South state by state. Second off, Northern whites simply lost their zeal for reforming the South. So what exactly was the latest straw for the end of Reconstruction for Brindy? The last straw was the Compromise of 1877. Can you please elaborate on that? Why, of course. During the election of 1876, the presidential candidate Rutherford B. Hayes and Samuel Tilden faced conflict in the electoral college votes. The Compromise of 1877 was used to resolve this conflict by having Hayes become president by making sure that he promised the end of military occupation in the South. The end of military occupation in the South essentially ended Reconstruction. Thank you for Brindy. Well, that's all for today's news. I'm for Brenda.
And I'm for Brindy.
And thanks for watching the Know Nothings News.